Let's take a moment now to configure EIGRP for IPv6 on R1. R2 and R3 are already participating in EIGRP for IPv6 Autonomous System 100. Therefore, we're going to use Autonomous System 100 on R1, and we'll enable both Gigabit 1/0.1 and Gigabit 2/0 on R1 for the EIGRP for IPv6 process. So on R1 right now, let's type in show run pipe to section router, EIGRP, and we'll see what's running right now on R1. And as you can see, we are already running EIGRP Autonomous System 100, but that is for IPv4. So it's important to note that you can run the exact same autonomous system number for EIGRP for IPv6 as you are for EIGRP for IPv4 because they are completely separate routing processes for completely different Layer 3 protocols. One's IPv4, one's IPv6. They do not intermingle, they do not talk together, they don't share information. So they are considered completely different, completely separate from each other. Let's go into global configuration mode, and the first thing we're going to do is type in IPv6 unicast routing. And remember why we're doing this is to turn on IPv6 routing on our router because it's disabled by default. So now that IPv6 routing is enabled, we'll type in the IPv6 router EIGRP command, and then we'll specify the autonomous system number. And in this case, we said we were dealing with autonomous system number 100, so let's type in 100. And now we're in IPv6 router EIGRP configuration mode. And if we look down through the different options that we have, we can set commands to their default, we can set up a default metric, we can define our administrative distance with a distance command, set up distribute lists, go into EIGRP mode, or pardon me, set up specific commands for EIGRP, mess around with the number of maximum paths we can have. We can statically define our neighbors with the neighbor command. So that way there, instead of using multicast, we can use unicast to communicate with those neighbors and form neighbor adjacencies. We still have the passive interface feature with EIGRP for IPv6. We can still perform redistribution. And we can shut down the topology. So I can type in shutdown and shut down topology. And as I mentioned before, we saw a command that said no shutdown. And that was used to enable the process. And I've seen documents in the past state that it's shut down by default, but newer documentation is not really stressing the fact that it's shut down by default anymore. And I've seen newer operating systems and newer routers without it being shut down by default. So it appears that it might not be shut down anymore by default, but just to be on the safe side, I've gotten into the habit of doing the no shutdown command. So that way there, I ensure that the EIGRP process is enabled. So here's something I want you to realize. If you are troubleshooting EIGRP for IPv6, you've reviewed the interfaces, making sure they're participating in the EIGRP process, it's the right autonomous system numbers, K values match, authentication is right, and everything is still not working, it might be because of this right here. The process for EIGRP Autonomous System 100 is shut down. So you type in the no shutdown command to bring it up. Keep that in mind. And also, we can set our variance for unequal path load balancing. So as I mentioned before, everything you learned for EIGRP in your IPv4 discussions are right here. Right here. So you can just take that knowledge and put it right into EIGRP for IPv6. Let's go out into global configuration mode and then issue the command interface gigabit Ethernet 1/0.1, and that's going to give us the ability to go into interface configuration mode and use the command IPv6 EIGRP and then specify the autonomous system number. So we set up autonomous system number 100. So we have just enabled the IPv6 process for autonomous system 100 on this interface. Let's now do that for 2/0, and we should now form a neighbor adjacency with R3. And there's our syslog message that successfully indicates that we have formed a neighborship with the router at the link local address FE80:31, and it is reachable out our local interface, gigabit Ethernet 2/0, and it says our adjacency is up. What are some of the other commands we can implement in interface configuration mode for IPv6? Well, if you type in IPv6, we can see here that you can set up the hello interval, which is still 5 seconds by default, and the hold time, which is 15 seconds. Now remember though, when you set the hold time for EIGRP, it's not for you. It's not for the local device. It is for the neighbor. You are telling the neighbor how long they have to wait until they consider you no longer a neighbor. So that's unlike OSPF. OSPF, it's how long you tell yourself to wait. Well, with EIGRP, it's how long you tell your neighbor to wait before they consider you no longer a neighbor.